Why are Netanyahu's autocrats after B'Tselem? B'Tselem evolved in early 1989 when it was established by a group of Israeli lawyers, academics, and doctors with the support of 10 members of Knesset, the Israeli parliament. The name comes from Genesis 1:27, which deems that all mankind was created B'Tselem Elohim, in the image of God, in line with the UN Universal Declaration of Human Rights. As Jewish far-right extremism was spreading in Israel, B'Tselem reflected an effort to replace nascent Jewish supremacism doctrines with the original universalistic spirit of social justice that had marked Judaism for centuries. It was founded after 2 years of the First Intifada, the Palestinian uprising in the occupied territories and in Israel. After 2 decades of futile struggle for decolonization and increasing Israeli repression, Palestinians resorted to protests, then civil disobedience, and eventually violence. Instead of taking a hard look at the causes of the uprising, the hard-right Likud government, led by Yitzhak Shamir, Netanyahu's one-time mentor and ex-leader of the violent pre-state Stern Group, deployed 80,000 soldiers in response, which started with live rounds against peaceful demonstrators. The brutal repression resulted in over 330 Palestinian deaths and 12 Israelis killed in just the first 13 months. The objective of the newly established B'Tselem became to document human rights violations in both Gaza and the West Bank. Amid a vicious cycle of violence, it sought to serve as the nation's voice of conscience. Today, it is led by human rights activist Yuli Novak, who had to leave Israel in 2022 due to mounting death threats, and chaired by Orly Noy, left-wing Mizrahi activist and editor of Pline 72 magazine. Despite mounting threats from the government, the Messianic far-right, and the settler extremists, B'Tselem has insistently recorded human rights violations in the occupied territories, earning the regard of rights organizations and awards worldwide. In early 2021, the NGO released a report describing Israel as an apartheid regime, which the Netanyahu cabinets have fervently rejected. Yet, the NGO simply codified, with abundant evidence, Israel's apartheid rule that had worsened over time. Several Israeli military, intelligence, and political leaders had used the same characterization since the 2000s. B'Tselem warned that Israeli governance was no longer about democracy plus occupation. It had morphed into a regime of Jewish supremacy from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea, that is, apartheid, and the kind of military excess that led to the genocidal atrocities in Gaza. How is the Netanyahu cabinet undermining B'Tselem? Recently, the Knesset passed a preliminary reading of 2 bills. They are an integral part of a broader shift from democracy to autocracy. The ultimate objective is to eliminate human rights and other rights groups from Israel, including B'Tselem, and to marginalize the autocratic harsh rights critics. In its efforts, the Netanyahu cabinet is relying on 2 proposed laws involving NGO taxation and the ICC. In the former case, the proposal slaps an 80% tax on donations from foreign countries, the UN and many international foundations supporting human rights. This will effectively cut off the NGO's funding. The proposal was approved in a preliminary reading. The second bill, which has now also passed a preliminary reading, seeks to criminalize any cooperation with the International Criminal Court, ICC. It could be seen as the Israeli version of the U.S. Trump administration's sanctions to undermine the ICC, its activities, and members. With its diffuse language, the Israeli ICC bill can be exploited to criminalize not only active assistance to the court, but the release of any information indicating the government or senior Israeli officials are committing war crimes or crimes against humanity. According to Israeli scholars of international law, the definitions in this dangerous bill are so broad that even someone sharing on social media a photo or video of a soldier documenting themselves committing what appears to be a war crime could face imprisonment. More precisely, half a decade in jail. If the ICC law criminalizes the work of B'Tselem and other human rights NGOs by making human rights defense a punishable offense, the NGO taxation law is intended to drain the meager financial resources of these NGOs, whose foreign subversion. B'Tselem is an independent, nonpartisan organization. It is funded by donations, grants from European and North American foundations that support human rights activity worldwide, and contributions by private individuals in Israel and abroad. These donors do not represent the kind of subversion that the Likud governments attribute to human rights NGOs, nor do they possess major financial resources. Even right-wing NGO critics estimate B'Tselem's annual funding at most about $3 million per year. Things are very different behind the donors of the Kohelet Policy Forum, led by neoconservatives with U.S.-Israeli dual citizenship and its many spin-offs. These have served as the Netanyahu cabinet's think tanks and authored many of their policies, including the judicial reforms. Totaling several $million, Kohelet in particular benefited from multi-million-dollar donations made anonymously and sent through the U.S. nonprofit American Friends of Kohelet Policy Forum, AFKPF. For years, these money flows originated mainly from two Jewish-American private equity billionaires and philanthropists, Arthur Danchik and Jeffrey Yass, the co-founders of Susquehanna International Group, The Fall of Israel, Chapter 6. With a net worth of $7.5 billion, Danchik is an active supporter of neoconservative Israeli causes. And so is Yass, with net worth estimated at $29 billion. Between 2010 and 2020, his Claus Foundation gave more than $25 million to the Jerusalem-based Shalom Hartman Institute, the Kohelet, and other right-wing causes. As the publicity-shy Danchik and Yass began to suffer from Kohelet's negative PR, they took distance, while other money flows offset the difference. By 2021, more than 90% of Kohelet's $7.2 million income came from the Central Fund of Israel, a family-run nonprofit that gave $55 million to more than 500 Israel-related causes. It was run by Marcus Brothers Textiles on 6th Avenue in Manhattan, which sponsors highly controversial settlement projects in the West Bank, while supporting the far-right activists Im Tirtzu and Honinu, which is notorious for defending Jewish far-right extremists charged with violence against and killings of Palestinians, toward a unitary, autocratic Jewish state. Given the present course, the ultimate demise of human rights in Israel is now a matter of time. The Netanyahu cabinet will decide when to bring the legislative proposals to hearings in the relevant parliamentary committees to prepare them for final approval. There is no doubt about the final objective, the creation of a state from the river to the water, but not the two-state model enacted almost 8 decades ago, nor the secular democratic Jewish state with a vibrant Arab minority. The goal is a Jewish unitary state in which both the rule of law and democracy will be under erosion. B'Tselem is the harsh right scapegoat for its own international isolation, but only the first one. There is more to come. Under the watch of and military aid and financing by the Biden and Trump administrations, the protection of human rights in occupied territories will soon be treated as a punishable crime, while the economic resources of the remaining human rights defenders will be decimated. In Gaza, the international community failed to halt the genocidal atrocities. If it fails to protect the last defenders of human rights in Israel, it is likely to become complicit in new atrocities in the West Bank.